Hey, this is Kahja Elliott, Bronx born and raised, ATL made, Bay Area becoming, and this is the As Told By podcast. All right, we are back for a new episode of the As Told By podcast. And, even though it wasn't my intention, it seems like this season is just turning into a straight up food season. As we've progressed, the conversations are just starting to center around food. So I'm going with it. And today is no exception to the rule. I am talking to Chef Selasie Dotse, owner of
Elade Test Kitchen.
Elade Test Kitchen. I wanted to make sure I had the pronunciation right. Elade Test Kitchen is an elevated fine dining pop-up concept offering a chef's table, supper club, and other culinary experiences where you create memorable and unique cultural experiences focusing on the African and Black diaspora.
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome to the As Told By podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So if y'all are in the Bay, and even if you're not in the Bay, many of you know Selasie. You have been on the scene for some time, longer than I realized.
Yes, I have actually been in the Bay for 6 years, but I've been cooking professionally and maybe kind of like have my name out there here and there for, I don't know, maybe like eight years.
Okay. You covered a lot of ground in 8 years.
I've tried, yes.
Well, look, let's take it to the beginning. So I read that you were born in Accra.
Yes.
But raised in the South. So at what age did you come here, and under what circumstance did you come to the U.S.?
So I was born in Ghana, in Accra. We left, actually my mom and I left Ghana when I was 1 because my dad is an organic chemist. So when I was born, he was actually living in the UK, and then he moved to Vancouver. So my mom and I joined him when I was 1 in Vancouver, and then we lived there till I was about 3. Then we moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Lived there till I was about 8. Lived there till I was about 11, and then made our way up to North Carolina. Did a brief stint in West Virginia because my dad was teaching at the West Virginia University. Mm-hmm. We were in Atlanta because he was getting his PhD at Georgia Tech, and then we moved to North Carolina because he took a job at a pharmaceutical company.
Cool.
So
just you made your way around.
Yes, I have been to more places than I thought.
But that informs, I'm sure, and we'll talk about that more, but that informs your perspective.
Yes.
I'm sure. Like many people who I talk to with this podcast, your love of cooking was developed through experiences in the kitchen with your family,
yes.
Particularly the women in your family who are the folks that kind of help curate your sensibility. So what was it about them that transmuted food from just like a basic necessity to a passion for you?
I mean, I've always had a thing for art. It ties in a lot with that. I grew up in kitchens with my mom. She taught me everything. She cooked every meal I grew up eating. It's expected being the firstborn daughter to know how to cook. But like I was saying, I've always had a thing for art, and the culinary arts is a form of art where you can use all 5 of your senses, smell, touch, sight, taste, Mm-hmm. And then with my mom, she was always having Food Network on, mm-hmm. Always Emerald Lagasse. That was probably one of her favorite shows. So I grew up always watching cooking shows mm-hmm. with her, and I was like, all right, I like to cook. I don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist, which is what my parents had wanted me to be. I was like, I like to cook, I don't want to be in front of a desk or doing something that doesn't really appeal to me. Mm-hmm. Food always caught my eye. And being around it, watching these shows, I was like, all right, maybe this is something that I can do. In high school is when I got my first restaurant job. I was 16 working at a pizza burger joint, mm-hmm. Just flipping burgers, making pizzas. And then I just kept going with it. Went to culinary school at Johnson and Wales. Worked in many restaurants there in Charlotte. And what really got me into like fine dining was cooking shows like Chef's Table. I had worked in so many kitchens, and the reason why fine dining appeals to me is because the food is just so beautiful, so immaculate, that I was like, all right, I don't really see that here in Charlotte, so where am I going to find that? The Bay, San Francisco. At the time that I moved out here, it had some of, I think other than New York and Chicago, had some of the most Michelin rated restaurants.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, why not go there?
This is a food destination.
I don't like cold, so that's
sure.
why I didn't choose Chicago or New York. I was like, well, California's got sunlight, great food, cannabis.
Hey, the trifecta. The trifecta.
Cannot complain. So that's what brought me out here and got me into fine dining.
Cool. All right. So now, okay, that places you in, the conversation with fine dining, but, with direct connection to such a vibrant culture, how did you reconcile some of the things that just naturally come with the American South during the time that you lived there? Even that are still prevalent in the last 30, 40 years, because you come from a family that sounds like it's very connected to African culture.
Yes.
And that has not always been the case in America, particularly not in the South, right? Mm-hmm. This whole celebration of African culture is a fairly new thing,
yes,
right? So how did you reconcile those two things?
Well, I mean, growing up, I would say I grew up pretty much in two cultures, In my house, it felt like, we were still in Ghana. Like, my mom cooked very Ghanaian dishes. There's always music playing. We're always talking to our family. Like, we're getting calls at like 6 a.m. because of the time difference. So 6 a.m. for us is like, I think they're 8 hours ahead. So
later in the day.
Much later in the day for them, but very early for us. So like, yeah. My parents always made sure to tell me, you are a Ghanaian, you are from Ghana. But it was also a little hard because, like, I would step out and I would step out of my home and, I'm in the American culture. I have to, just leave that at home. And one thing is that, like, I'm going to be honest, there is some anti-Blackness in the African culture, but I want to say it's mostly because we just don't understand each other. Yeah. So my parents were always telling me, even though you are Ghanaian, we don't want you acting like Black Americans. And me, like, I was just kind of like, okay, I mean, we're all still Black, like, just because they hear your accent, like,
when the police pull up,
when the police
we're
stop,
still all Black.
We're still all Black. But yeah, true. Like, that was hard because, like, I would go to school, I would have, Black friends, but my parents would always be like, you can't be like them. And that wasn't easy. I actually grew up in a primarily like white neighborhood and went to primarily white schools. So I was primarily around mostly white people. Like, they had to bus in the Black kids just to, like, diversify my high school, at least. It was very white, very conservative. I wouldn't say that, how can I word this? Like, it like, growing up wasn't, I would say, the easiest, just being in two different cultures and having parents just wanted me to really understand, like, you are African. I would have never thought that I was going to do African food, though. as a chef, you know, even though my parents had told me like you should do African food, it never really appealed to me. And I think that's because when you see fine dining, you see restaurant foods, it's very Eurocentric, it's very white. The food looks nice, whereas, you know, our food, I couldn't like visualize soups and stews in a more elevated way, you know. I don't want to say that our food is ugly. That's not the word that I would want to use, but visually appealing, not so much.
We just hadn't seen it represented.
Yeah, I hadn't seen it yet. And it took many years. I want to say at least 10, about 10 to 15 years for me to finally see some representation. But that didn't happen until I had already moved out into the Bay. I had started to see chefs like Eric Hajapong on Top Chef. You know, he was doing things. I had met Serene Mabe of Dakar in New Orleans.
Yep.
He was doing pop-ups, and I was like, okay, some people are doing some things. I had started following Michael Elegbede from Nigeria.
Oh, not familiar with him.
Yeah, he has a Nigerian tasting menu concept called, I want to say it's called Hitan.
Okay.
Hitan Test Kitchen. There wasn't much representation. So I always thought when I was going to open up my restaurant, it was going to be some like Italian or French. But I think I answered your question.
You did.
Maybe. Did I?
You did. You did. And I mean, in saying, you know, you didn't see a lot of representation, so eventually becoming the thing that you would have needed to see, you know, you are formally trained, right?
Yes.
Most people formally trained come through like French formal training, and you graduated, as you stated, from Johnson & Wales with a dual degree, and then cutting your teeth in the restaurant scene in Charlotte.
Yes.
What are some of the early lessons you learned about the space between the art of the craft and then actually doing it for money as a job? I would imagine those are two. There's a big gap between the two.
Yes. I mean, I didn't know that. I mean, how can I word that? I would say that going in, I didn't think I would make like too much money. Like I wasn't going in because I wanted to make a lot of money. Like I went into this industry because I generally just love food. I think I didn't realize that the money wasn't really there until like I had graduated, and they're like, you know, back when minimum wage here in the Bay is like $15. The minimum wage on the East Coast is like $7.25. So when I got out of culinary school and I'm getting a job, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna give you minimum wage, and minimum wage was like $7.25, and I'm like, how am I supposed to live on $7.25? And like, so I learned quickly I would have to have multiple jobs in order to survive. So for the beginning of my career, I was working at least like 3 jobs just to like survive. Like I had like 2 part-time jobs and 1 full-time job just to like get by, because culinary school, I didn't have to go to culinary school. I went because my parents said you need to have a degree in something. Like you just can't.
We want that paper.
We want that paper. Yes, you know how to cook, but you still need a degree. Johnson & Wales, it's a private education, so it's very expensive. I had to get loans. I did get a bunch of scholarships, but like when you graduate and you got to pay off these loans, it don't matter if you don't make, you know, what you thought you would be making. Like, so yeah, the money, I didn't realize that it wasn't there until I had actually like finished culinary school. With more jobs, you know, I started to make a little bit more. Like, I think when I finally got to a fine dining restaurant called Upstream, they started me as a serving assistant, so kind of like a busser. So I was making like $4 an hour plus tips. And then when I got into the kitchen, they like started me, I want to say at like 9, And then with every job, I would make a little bit more. I think when I left Charlotte, the max I was making was like 15. And that was after like 6 years in the industry out there. So started like $8-9 an hour, and by the time like 6 years later, I was making like 15. But like I didn't really care. I mean I guess I did care, but it didn't really bug me that I wasn't making too much money because I knew that I was learning.
Yeah.
You know, culinary school, I guess, taught me the terminology of things, you know, like when you are boiling vegetables and then put it in ice water, that's called blanching and shocking. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that's what that was called. I had seen my mom do it all the time. Like, she boils the vegetables, she throws it in ice. But going to culinary school, I learned like the I guess proper the refined terms. So like your names, so your knife cuts, yeah, it was good to learn the like technical side. It helps when you get into a kitchen because like some of these more, I guess, higher end kitchens, like they would prefer that you have a culinary degree. Yeah. Because sometimes they don't really have the time or the resources to like teach you.
To do upskilling in real time.
Yeah, I know people say that, oh, like you can go to the school of hard knocks, but not every restaurant has the time or the chefs who are willing to take that time to like teach you to grow and be a better chef, you know. The way that I learned is I just bounced around from different kitchens. Like once I learned what I felt like I had learned and I wasn't going to learn more, I was off to my next kitchen. Mm-hmm. And that's how I came out here, like to the Bay. I felt like, all right, I've learned everything when it comes to cooking. I hadn't learned how like to run a kitchen or a business, but I had like learned, okay, I've learned cooking. I want to do this next level of like upscale, elevated, like tweezers. You know, Chef's Table really like was like, wow, like there's a whole other level of cooking. Yeah. And I gotta leave. So that's how I was like, I'm probably gonna make that leap and move to California.
Come on out.
California was always in, you know, the horizon. I just didn't have anything to really push me out there. I want to say maybe Soul Food Sessions. So my last...
Yeah, I haven't heard of that.
So Soul Food Sessions was a collection of Black chefs in Charlotte who are like, you know, there's nothing for us. We see all these white chefs who are doing dinners. No one's inviting us. Let's do our own thing. And this was Greg Collier and his wife, Sabrina.
Of Bay Haven.
Yes. And Leah and Luis. Greg Williams and Jamie Barnes of What the Fries. They're also in Charlotte. Michael Bowling, who is now the general manager at Carolina Farm Trust. And then the pastry chef was Jamie Turner. So they were just like, you know, let's do our own thing. And I was in a stage in my career where like no one was really hiring me. I couldn't really find any work. I reached out because Greg was looking for like Greg Collier was looking for like a morning cook, and like he and I got talking, and he like told me like the reason why no one gets you is because you're Black. And he was like, you know, I'm starting this series with some other local chefs. Slide through, you know, like come hang out with us. Yeah. So I went to that first dinner, and everyone looked like me. The food was like recognizable because like Black and Southern food, African and Southern food,
so closely related.
They're literally siblings. Yeah. Or like parent and child. You know, like seeing us cook our food, and then they invited me to help out with the second dinner. Like that gave me confidence again, because I was starting to lose my confidence because like I wasn't getting work. I was literally just line cook jobs, and I'm like, I don't want to be a line cook. Like I want to like be a sous chef. Yeah, I want to be able to do more. And Greg was like, yeah, like no one who doesn't look like you or doesn't understand what's going on, they're not going to give you those jobs. So like I started doing dinners with them, and that's what gave me the confidence to finally be like, you know what? I am badass. Mm-hmm. I am the shit. Let me go ahead and move to California. This. Let me go ahead and see what these Michelin kitchens are like. So
I mean, well, shout out to the Colliers for that, but just for coming up with Bay Haven as a whole. So I got to go to Bay Haven for the first time this past October, and the highlight of the trip for me by far was the Mother Earth dinner. So you were a part of that, but essentially it was this dinner of like 6 or 7 chefs. Everyone contributed a dish that was so closely tied to their culinary roots, their culinary heritage. And I walked out of there like, what is going on here? Who are all these people? So it sounds like during the time that you were there, you were really able to build a strong sense of community in this burgeoning Black culinary world that people just maybe were not paying as much attention to right at that time.
Yes.
Yeah, that's dope. The dinner was dope.
Yeah, it was good to see you.
Yes, I was just be pulling up. That's my mission for this year. I was just be pulling up all these food festivals around the country. But, so you end up coming to the Bay, which seems like it will be a chef's paradise with, the prevalence of so much quality sourcing of food. What were some of the differences you observed between the regions that led you to feel that time was right for a latte test kitchen?
So a latte test kitchen actually was rebranded about a year or two ago. It was originally called Sankofa, which ties back to my Ghanaian heritage, because Sankofa is an Akan term to go back for it, mm-hmm. which means to use the knowledge of the past to move forward. I started it, I want to say it was 2020 during the pandemic.
People was getting busy. Okay, hold up. You like the third person that has something that is popping. I was like, it was during the pandemic in 2020. And I'm like, damn, I was just home eating. People are starting whole businesses. I'm not mad at y'all. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, like, I always wanted to, like, have my own thing, Like, I was in these kitchens, like, seeing, like, oh, all right, I see what Michelin is. I realized very quickly that it isn't cooking from scratch as much as I thought. There's a lot of like sous vide and using hydrocolloids, which are like those chemicals to like make things more consistent, which I understand. Mm-hmm. To maintain the consistency of your sauces and your purees and your proteins, you gotta use technology. I get that. That was just a big surprise, because coming from the kitchens in the South and on the East Coast, when you're firing something for service, like, it's a raw protein, your vegetables like might be blanched, but we're blanching and shocking them. We're not sous videing them in a bag and then picking that up. Like that was very strange to me and very kind of like weird. Like, yeah, it was a new style of cooking. I'm still not really used to it. Okay. Like I still like to like cook things from raw as much as I can. But I actually did my first pop-up when I was working as a cook at SPQR. It was called A Hard Pill to Swallow, because I wanted to address the lack of, like, not necessarily Black representation in fine dining, but cultural representation. So I was working with several cooks at SPQR. One guy was from Venezuela, one guy was Mexican, one guy was from Turkey, and we were all like, let's just cook together and see what we can come up with. So I helped build that, but I realized very quickly that people of color and Black people don't understand what the main issue is in fine dining. The main reason why I started that pop-up was I wanted to talk about Black issues in cooking and the fact that they weren't Black, like they couldn't understand that. Yeah. So that's when I was like, okay, maybe this is something that I need to do on my own, like try and find other Black chefs. So after I did that dinner, I was like, all right, how many Black chefs can I find? And that's when I was like, I'm going to go on a search, trying to talk to as many Black chefs, Black business owners, Black somms, Black mixologists. Like, if you were on Instagram and you were doing something with food, I was following you, I was DMing you, trying to get it, like, hey, I'm a young Black chef. I'm trying to start a collective.
Yeah.
Something similar to what Soul Food Session was. Soul Food Sessions had really inspired me. Like, I moved out here thinking that San Francisco's very progressive. And I put that in quotes.
I'm not.
Because I learned.
Shady laugh. You had some learnings coming.
I had some learnings. I was like, oh, it's progressive if you're white.
Or if you're socioeconomically aligned.
Yes. If you are a person of color and make a certain amount of money, you're not put into that category. So that's when I was like, all right, I need to start something that's similar to Soul Food Sessions, because there are too many people preaching that they're accepting but want to say some slick shit. Sorry, can I curse on here?
You sure can.
Okay.
Go right on.
But yeah, there are some people who would say some slick shit to me, and I'm like, I don't understand this racism. Like these subtle, like, kind of saying things. Because coming from the South, I'm used to, like... Overt
yes.
in your face. Like, oh, I know not to fuck with you because you are telling me you don't like Black people. You don't fuck with Black people. Cool. Understood.
There. Right.
You can stay over there. Here, it's like, oh, yeah, we're not racist. But we'll just say things that I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand what you're trying to say to me. Like, I know... there is something happening. There is some sort of, like, racism or something. You may not understand what you're saying, but I understand that you don't understand what you're saying.
Maybe you do, but you're saying something.
Yeah, you're saying something that doesn't make me feel good, and it's making me side-eye.
Yeah.
But yeah, but after so many interactions where I was like, oh, I don't like these interactions, I was like, okay, I need to start something for us. 2020 was a year of lots of restaurants saying we support Black lives, so many Black squares, but they didn't have any Black people in their kitchens. They didn't have any Black people on their staff. You know, even Black diners was a rarity. But then they're playing all this hip hop with the N-word. And I'm like... isn't
that a weird experience?
Very weird.
I've had that experience a few times, and I'm like, does anybody else hear that?
Like N-word. And I'm like, no one here looks like me.
Who made the playlist?
Who? Why?
Yeah.
So just after so many experiences like that, I was like, nah, we need something for us, you know, that we can just go and be ourselves, where we can go and be Black and not be judged. So that's when I was like, I'm gonna start this dinner series called Sankofa Pop-Up. I did a couple of to-go pop-ups. I did one tasting menu pop-up with Jeff Davis when he was at True Laurel.
Shout out to Burdell.
Jeff is doing amazing things. But yeah, I had gotten laid off at Lazy Bear. And the owner was like, you know, I know some of you guys have your own pop-up concepts. If you need a ghost kitchen, you can use the space to order through us, to prep. So I was like, sweet, because that's what I need. I need something, like, some place to, like, prep. I need some place to order. So that helped me, like, start to finally be able to do my own thing. And I was like, no one's doing Black food. No one's doing African food. The only person who I saw was Serene. Serene left. He did a couple of pop-ups and went back to Senegal for a little bit. And then he cooked in Spain for a little bit. Then he went back to New Orleans. And I was like, all right, maybe I should pick up his mantle. You know, like, he had worked at Atelier Cren. So he was trying to showcase things like I was. 2020, that's when I was like, I've learned some techniques, I've learned some secrets, let me see what I can do with it. Then I was like, okay, I need a lot more resources. Because I was kind of like funding it out of pocket, you know, out of my work money, my unemployment, you know, trying to survive and do pop-ups. Eventually, I was like, you know what, maybe I need to like take some time to like really like iron this out. Because I'd only done like one full pop-up and when I did a hard pill to swallow. And so when I did Sankofa, I was like, this is a lot more complicated. Because I mean, I am and still am a one-person team. You know, I do all the planning essentially by myself. I do all the organizing, all the prepping, cooking, grocery shopping.
Those pop-ups are not easy to do.
It's not. So I was like, oh, pop-ups are fun, but they're a lot of work. Let me take a step back and let me like come up with a plan. So I came up with my plan, but then I was like, I kind of need to go back to work because, so I went back to work at Lazy Bear, still with the intention of I'm going to keep doing pop-ups, but I have to build my skill and my repertoire and my resources a little bit more. Left Lazy Bear, well, actually got fired from Lazy Bear. Then ended up at Copa's where I was able to do another pop-up. And that's when I was able to rebrand because Sankofa, like I said, is an Hakan concept. And I'm an Ewe. Yeah, so the Hakan people, they speak Tree, and they are a more well-known cultural group in Ghana. My people are Ewe, and we're from the Volta region, which is near the Volta River. It's the largest man-made river in, I want to say, the world.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So after talking to my parents and trying to like tie it more back into Ewe instead of Hakan, my parents helped me come up with the name Helade, which means tasty, or it appeals to the tongue in Ewe. So after I had done more, you know, research into my cultural background, I was like, okay, I'm going to tie this more into the foods that I grew up eating. Because, like I said, my mom cooked every dish that I grew up eating. But then as I was, like, seeing some of the connections between West African food and Southern food and following all these chefs, I was learning that a lot of these dishes are just derivatives of each other. We share a lot of the same ingredients, a lot of the same flavors. So that's when I was going to also try to tie it into, I want to tell the story of the transgression of the story from West Africa to the South and possibly to California, because my journey was kind of similar, you know, Ghana, South. Now I'm in California. You know, a lot of Black people have that journey in their history. So their ancestors were taken from Africa, put into the South. Once they were freed, a lot of them left, went up north, and some of them ended up in California. But yeah, this is just my ode to the food that my mom cooked, our ancestors, but also here in California, we can get access to like anything. Like
sure can't. Almost year round, you can.
Year round, like the produce, the seafood, because like Japan is just right across the water, so you can get the best seafood year round, best ingredients. Foraging is possible because like once it rains, springtime, everything starts popping up. So I was just like, what can I do with California ingredients and West African flavors? Black flavors.
Well, you did that. You did that because the first time I had your food. So I think I had kind of just been aware, right? I like to have an awareness of like, who are the key players, right, in the region. So I had an awareness of what you do, but I got to come for the first time to one of your pop-ups that you had at Ground Floor. I think it was back in July of last year. And, you know, I like to come to these things like not knowing what to expect. And I was, obviously the food was good, but to me, it was the educational component that I speak to that a lot about being at these pop-up dinners and having to think about what cocktails are or what dishes are or ingredients that are listed or what's that preparation. And so I found myself doing that a lot at your dinner. Preparations of things that I had before, but they just were showing up a little bit differently. So I walked away from the experience at Ground Floor like, okay, this is, you know, really interesting. Dope flavors. I like the feel of this. And then shortly thereafter, I saw that you were now entering into this collaboration that I thought was so fun, right? This East meets West Africa collaboration with Cafe Kaluchi, which is an Ethiopian-based restaurant here in Oakland. So talk about how that came about.
Yeah. So at the Ground Floor dinner, I did a dish that used some of the spices from Cafe Kaluchi. Cafe Kaluchi also has a spice company called Brundo Ethiopian Spice Company. So one day I was at the farmer's market, you know, just shopping for a pop-up, and I saw them because they had a booth at the Grand Lake market, and I was like, oh, okay, some Ethiopian spices. And then I saw Burberry, and I'm like, this is Burberry from an Ethiopian company? All right, let's see what I can do. So I did a Burberry oxtail meat pie, and I posted it, and I tagged them because, you know, anytime I use a black or African, you know, product, I try and tag them to be like, hey, I'm using you because I'm trying to showcase you. So they saw that and they were like, oh, that's dope. Like, let's see how we can work together. Daniel is the point of contact at Cafe Kaluchi. Really dope guy. Pretty much told me that, like, he also wants to find ways to showcase more Black talent and showcase African food. So he was like, you know, we would love to host you. Like, what do you need from us? Like, how can we work together? And I was like, I mean, I really just need a space to, like, host my pop-ups, maybe, like, prep and store some things. And he was like, all right, like, as long as you showcase our spices, we can do that. So I was like, that was a great, you know, deal, because, like, pop-up spaces, some of them charge like an arm and a leg, and it's like, you don't make a profit once you pay everyone after your ingredients. Like, you may make like a couple $100, if that, but at the end of the day, it's nothing is put back into your business. So I was like, well, if all I gotta do is just showcase your spices, that's easy for me. So yeah, I was like, let's do this. I did the first dinner in September, because we had met, I want to say, in like August, July, August, met, sat. I came up with a menu. It's technically like a 9-course menu, but it's advertised as a 7-course menu. Okay. I work with the beverage team there to come up with, you know, to come up with either a pairing or a beverage selection that showcases Black winemakers, African winemakers, spirit makers, because I just want to like I want this to be as Black as possible. You know? I want to showcase as many of us as possible, because the thing that blows my mind is to be in the Bay, have all these elevated fine dining restaurants, and no one's doing Black food. No one's doing African food. Yeah, like, it just blew my mind. So I was like, this is my way to just give us all the attention and recognition that I feel like we haven't been able to get. I've done, I want to say maybe this will be my 4th dinner. This upcoming Sunday is the 4th, and sad to say, last.
Look, you take me right to my next point. So at the time we're recording this Sunday upcoming, as Selasie stated, is going to be the final pop-up collaboration dinner at Cafe Colucci. I will be in attendance at this point. I didn't know at the time I bought the ticket because I have been seeing them going on and like the dates just didn't line up. I got a ticket to this one, and then you shared this really exciting news. So share for people who haven't heard or didn't see your social media post. What is about to happen for you?
I am moving to Amsterdam. I have accepted a sous chef position at a Ghanaian-owned Pan-African restaurant in Amsterdam. Just applied on a whim, because pop-ups are hard, and I was still trying to look for work. And I saw that the chef, Joseph Hodum, who is a well-known Ghanaian chef, was looking for chefs, and I was like, "Are you accepting U.S. applicants?" And he was like, "Yeah." So I sent my resume in and got an interview, then got the offer, and I leave in April.
Wow.
I'm not sure exactly when in April. I know the restaurant is going through a remodel right now. And they plan to reopen in May. But after a year of pop-ups and of a year of being in business for myself, I'm going to go learn and cook more about, the food that I'm trying to do, because like Pan-African, Ghanaian-owned, I don't see that out here.
Well, not in large amounts. Is the restaurant you're going to pronounce Momi or Momi? Momi. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're going to be at Restaurant Momi. Just the fact that exists in a community, would imply that there's a presence of people who want to, even though it's Amsterdam, right? It's not primarily Black, but there definitely is an influence there. So this would suggest that there's an audience of people who really want to experience the African diaspora as far as a dining experience. What are you most excited about as far as being part of bringing this region along on the journey of West African culture? Like, you're bringing your Bay Area sensibility, you're bringing your Southern sensibility, of course, you're bringing your West African sensibility. So what are you most excited about as far as putting that now on an international stage?
Man, that's a good question. I want to say I'm just excited to put it all together. I'm excited to work with other Black and African chefs who have that upscale experience, and just to see like what can we do. My goal is never to get like Michelin recognition or like world's best recognition, but if we can, like, because right now I think there's only 3, maybe 4 African chefs who have Michelin recognition, but none of them are on the continent. They are all in Europe. So I know that Coco, which is a West African concept in London, they just got their first star. There's Ikoyi, which is also in London, that has 2 Michelin stars. And then there is a Nigerian woman chef. I can't think of her name, but she also just got a Michelin star just from doing Nigerian food in a elevated manner. So I don't want that to be the goal, but if that is a possibility,
we'll take it.
Like, I wish that there were chefs in the US who would be able to get that recognition, and I want to say that the only chef who I can think of who could possibly do that is Serene in New Orleans. You know, he's telling the story of Senegalese food in the South. Like, I feel like it may be a little bit easier for him because the South is still, like, not too far from West Africa, you know. Whereas me, I'm all the way in California, you know. The connect isn't there like it is for Serene. But, yeah, I'm most excited of just putting it all together and the possibility of, like, getting some accolades. Yeah. Would be nice.
Well, you've put in your time. You know, we are absolutely going to miss you here in the Bay. You know, I have always appreciated that. I felt that there wasn't a lot of compromise in your food, right? Like, I could tell when I would have occasion to have tasting menus that you put together that, like, this is a person who's standing 10 toes down in their culture, which I thought was so dope, you know, for what you represent. Even with the Bay not having huge numbers for the sheer volume of restaurants we have here, there's only, like, when I think of West African food, Jollof Kitchen, Kendija, which is featuring like a Liberian style of cooking, Chef Nafi and Teranga in the city, featuring Senegalese. So there's just not a lot of people doing it. So, and not a lot of people doing it well, right? One might argue. So glad for the few of you that are here. And just as someone left and it created a space for you to step in, now you leave and it creates a space for somebody else to step in, even though, you know, we hate to see you go. That's two now that aren't located here. You and Sarah Kernan that, you know, is like not here anymore. So it's like, damn, we don't want to lose all our people, but we're so grateful for what you have contributed to Oakland in your time here in the culinary scene in Oakland. You know, I want to wrap us up with my top 3 Chef Selasie dishes because I have been to a couple of events that you've done tasting menus. So I have to say my first favorite was the hamachi tostada at Coco Noir. I was like, this is so good. This is like salsa matcha and like all these things. I like hamachi and I love a tostada. I like that whole ceviche, you know, that whole family of dishes. But there was something about this and I was thinking, I kept describing it in my mind as muddy in a good way, right? It was muddy because it was rich and it was deep and the flavors it had a lot of flavors. It's not
very clean. I feel like a lot of the cooking out here is very clean.
Yes.
Lots of like lemon and olive oil. And I'm like, this is boring. Let's throw some spice in here.
We needed smoke. There was smoke. There was complexity. Yes. All the things. So that was my number one. That's my number one. My number 2, which you mentioned, was the oxtail turnover from the dinner at Ground Floor. That was really good as well because, you know, I've only had, oxtail in the traditional preparation, but not as, you know, a meat patty or, you know, just in some other variety. So that was number 2 for me. And then number 3, I intentionally left blank because I believe I'm going to have it on Sunday night.
Probably.
I saw the menu rundown. I hadn't started Googling yet, but I will need to. But I'm leaving space because I'm really excited. One, not only to be a part of what has been going on between you and Cafe Colucci, but also to help send you off, right, into your new venture with all the love from the Bay Area. So tell us where we can keep up with you, even though you will not be here anymore.
Yeah, so I'm on Facebook, Selasie Dotse. I'm also on Instagram, SDOTSE89. It's a private, but I will accept a follow. And you can follow the pop-up page, Helade, spelled ELADE _TK. for Alade Test Kitchen to keep up with what I'm going to be doing. Everyone keeps telling me I should start a blog. You know,
why not?
A blog since I'm going to be cooking in another country. So why not? You know, people can keep up with me, see what I'm doing. If you want to come to Amsterdam for a pop-up, I may do a pop-up there.
Hey.
If you want to come to Amsterdam just to experience the restaurant, come to Amsterdam.
I've not been. And I was telling you before we got started, this year, like, I'm hyper focused on food travel. Like, I'm trying to go to as many places as I can affordably get to, to sample food culture in other places. So shout out to you. Congratulations on all that is going on. I will make sure to post all of that information with the show notes. And if you are looking to keep up with me in between episodes, you can find me at Hey K in the Bay on Instagram. That's this week's episode of the As Told By podcast. See y'all on the next one.
Bye.